Welcome back. If you just joined us, you're watching the news at 10 on Channels Television, coming to you from Lagos. A reminder of our major stories tonight. Battle in the PDP yet to abate as Sheriff threatens to jail Ahmed Bakarfi and his group for alleged contempt of court. Ahmed Bakarfi group fights back, says Sheriff has no right to take over the party's secretariat until the Supreme Court decides. OPEC Secretary General Mohammed Barkindo says OPEC countries lost $1 trillion oil revenue to decline in global oil prices. And U.S. President Donald Trump proposes $5 billion increase in military spending. You'll get more on our top stories and others on our website, channelstv.com. You can, and also on youtube.com/channelsweb. You can also watch us on the go on your mobile device. Log on to m.channelstv.com or download the Channels TV app for Android, iOS, and Windows phones from their respective stores. Having the Channels TV and Channels 24 app will give you access to news and updates. You also have the Eyewitness feature, so you too can be part of the news. Just install the app, then tap and swipe to reveal the Eyewitness menu and follow the instructions to share those pictures, videos, or news of happenings around you. Let's take a look at some of the pictures that you sent into our Eyewitness portal. First is this one. It's of a burning petrol tanker at Nipco filling station in Okene along Lokoja Expressway. And what baffles the Eyewitness reporter is the absence of any action to put out the fire with extinguishers. The Eyewitness reporter wants authorities to ensure all filling stations are equipped with fire extinguishers. Our second image is of a dangerous act in Kano State where a cyclist is seen holding onto a lorry. The Eyewitness reporter condemns this as it is not safe for both himself and other road users and wants authorities to also help to stop this. Our third picture is from Lagos State, where Eyewitness reporter sends in this picture of a truck conveying students and wonders if this is authorized by the school. Our final image tonight is from Lagos, also showing customers at a bank on queues. Eyewitness reporter complains of shortage and rudeness of staff, poor air conditioning, and wants the bank to improve on staff courtesy. Thank you for sending in those pictures, and please keep them coming. Nigeria's economy has remained fragile since the onset of the global financial crisis of 2008 and the effects of shocking results from low oil prices in 2014. In a bid to restore the economic health, the federal government has come up with an economic recovery and growth plan, but the launch of the roadmap is currently being delayed. Our business correspondent Temple Ashaju takes a look at the dire need for the roadmap.
The Nigerian Economic Recovery and Growth Plan is a medium-term program for 2017 to 2020. The plan, which is built on a strategic implementation program, is developed for the purpose of restoring economic growth while leveraging the ingenuity and resilience of Nigerians. Developed through a consultative process with the executive, Nigerian legislators, the private sector, as well as civil society groups, the ERGP, as technically called, focuses on 4 key areas, including macroeconomic stability, agriculture and food security, power and petroleum product sufficiency, and industrialization of the small and medium enterprises. But the absence of the President Muhammadu Buhari on health grants appears to be delaying the launch of the much-anticipated roadmap initially scheduled for February. With the month passing by, it would appear the domestic and global communities are running out of patience. Temple Ashaju, Channels Television News.
Joining us for the analysis tonight is foremost economist Dr. Biodun Adedipe. Thank you for joining us on the news at 10.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you here. So the Economic Recovery and Growth Plan is guided by 5 overarching principles. And so should and would the implementation of this plan be deterred by the President's health?
Well, ideally, given the situation Nigeria is currently, and also what I describe as how we got here, the plan should be treated as an emergency plan whose executions should commence, should have commenced yesterday. In which case, the health condition of the president should really not delay the launch and commencement of execution of the plan. And my take on this is very simple. Government is a continuum. And happily, we have in place an acting president, which means there's a government in place that is still running the affairs of the nation. So whether the president is absent or not, in my opinion, should not prevent the commencement of execution of the plan, especially given the condition Nigeria is currently.
And the IMF is advising that Nigeria avoid delays in the launch of and the implementation of this plan. What are we supposed to make of that? I mean, why the hurry? Why they pushing us to do this?
Well, for two good reasons. Number one, IMF, if you like, quote and unquote, call them the economic policeman of the world. And of course, they have their own overarching objective. And that is to see that when nations get into crisis, especially currency crisis, they want to ensure that they get out of the crisis quickly. That is one. The other side to it is that they want to also prevent those that are not in crisis from getting into crisis. So they are interested in Nigeria getting out of the crisis we are in as quickly as possible. Now, the second part to it is the fact that in another 2 months thereabout, we'll be talking about the spring meetings of the IMF, the World Bank. So now, in preparation towards that, because following that, they will issue an outlook, what we call a revised outlook, not only for the world economy, but for the various constituencies, developed markets, emerging markets, and of course, they'll be talking about specific things about every country. So the question is, if we are able to commence the execution of this plan, it then means IMF will factor it as one of the inputs into its revised outlook for the Nigerian economy. Good enough, the one they issued in January says Nigeria will go into recovery before the end of 2017. But then, that hope, which was triggered in part by this plan, which the president mentioned in his New Year address to the nation, is premised on the fact that we would have commenced the execution of this plan before the end of February. So in which case, it becomes important, therefore, for us to begin the execution of the plan.
Is it also important that we begin the execution of the plan as soon as possible, because next year preparations for elections will begin? And as we know in this country, the year before the election is always, filled with preparations for elections. Not much really gets done in that year.
Now, I will take that from a perspective of the history that this government is going gradually into 2 years of being in the office. Now, this is a 4-year plan. It's a medium-term plan that will run from 2017 and all the way to 2020, and of course, usher us into the new decade, 2021. It then means that if we commence implementation now, we have barely 2 years before the 2019 elections. So in which case, this government cannot afford to execute for only 1 year when preparation for elections will commence, as we have always known it historically in Nigeria. So the challenge before this government is that if they are also looking at 2019 as a time, they hope not to hand the baton over to another team or political party. Then they cannot afford to run it as we have had it historically in Nigeria. And that means run the execution up until election, now focus on politics rather than governance. So the issue before them now is there is a need for more attention on governance than politics. So what I would expect them to do is to run the full course of the 2 years between now and the next election, and not fall into the history that we have known with governments in Nigeria.
But is that really supposed to hinder the implementation itself? I mean, when we're talking earlier, you said there was a plan with the previous administration which was not fully implemented.
That's right.
So what could hinder this plan from going on? And then, even if, as you say, government is a continuum. So
That's right.
if this is a plan already set in motion,
Yes.
then government, it should continue, no
Precisely.
matter which government,
Which government is
in
yes.
power.
In fact, the way I interpret it is this. this administration's 4-year term ends May 28, 2019. Now, if this plan is executed, we would have done only 2 years of that, plus a few months by the time we get to May 28, 2019, which means we still have some portion of that plan, maybe about 1.5 years to execute before we conclude on it. So that would mean that whether this government wins the election in 2019 or not, Nigeria will have a plan. In which case it is not the plan of this government, but the plan of Nigeria. And that is the message that this government needs to put before us very strongly.
Dr. Biodun Fadikpe, thank you so much for joining us on the News at 10.
My pleasure
speaking with you. Now, people living in Africa's Lake Chad region are set to be facing impending famine caused by drought, chronic poverty and Islamist insurgency Boko Haram. The presence of the militants have prevented farmers from planting crops or accessing the lake to provide water for their animals. That may be a thing of the past now, given the resolve of international donors to commit $672 million in the area over the next 3 years.
Aid agencies must get food to close to 3 million people by July to avert a famine in Africa's Lake Chad region caused by drought, chronic poverty and Islamist insurgents Boko Haram.
Being here also today.
That's according to the United Nations as it launches the funding appeal. The United Nations, which says it needs $1.5 billion in humanitarian aid for the region this year, had previously raised $19 million towards this target.
It is really about a long-term commitment. It's about humanitarian assistance, about development. It's also about security. It's also about political solutions.
Today, Nigeria and countries contiguous to the Lake Chad are experiencing one of the largest and gravest humanitarian crises in the world. In Nigeria alone, 26 million people have been affected by the Boko Haram insurgency. The 2017 Humanitarian Response Plan has identified 10.7 million people in need of life-saving assistance.
Boko Haram militants have killed around 15,000 people and forced more than 2 million from their homes during the 7-year insurgency. The most urgent need is to reach 2.8 million people with rice or sorghum or cash to buy supplies by July.
We do need to transmit the message to world leaders, with all of you, that not only has this crisis killed and displaced, but it has destroyed entire social fabrics of communities.
Overall, 10.7 million people, roughly 2 out of 3 inhabitants, need humanitarian help, such as food, water, education, or protection. The United States, a major aid donor to the region, in previous years did not pledge any money. O'Brien said this was because the U.S. administration was still in transition following November's election.
When the News at 10 returns, Central Bank of Nigeria injects additional $180 million into the foreign exchange market to boost liquidity. We'll have more in business news.